Hello everyone and welcome to this product demonstration webinar called Streamline Your ESG Risk and Reporting with Protecht. My name is Matt Taylor. I'm a senior pre-sales consultant here at Protecht and I'll guide you through the product demonstration today. For those who aren't familiar with Protecht, well, we've been around for 20 plus years and we've been helping organizations embrace risk as a strategic advantage. Today we'll focus on this through the lens of ESG, one of the fastest growing areas in risk and compliance today. Protecht DRM, the system we'll go through today, is a powerful GRC solution that brings everything together in the one place. So risk, compliance, ESG, resilience, and more. It's designed to support the full life cycle of risk end to end. So what makes us different? Well, we provide a risk system built by risk professionals that supports clients at any point on their risk maturity journey through our scalable and quick to deploy solution. This is evidenced not only by those global industry experts you see on the screen, but also by our 97% customer retention rate, which is really a testament to our dedication in supporting all of our clients. Before we get stuck in, just some housekeeping rules to remind you all. The webinar will run for approximately 20 minutes with the majority of the time in the product. If you have any questions, please leave your questions in the chat within the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll be responding to these once the webinar is complete. Once the webinar is complete, we'll be providing a short questionnaire to help with future webinars, and we'll also include today's slides and the recording. So just a brief webinar overview before we dive into the product. Really on the left hand side you'll see a statement which I think is really true today when it comes to ESG. So ESG is more than just a compliance exercise. It is becoming, and even more so, more about making better business decisions that align with stakeholder expectations and ultimately provide an organization with long-term resilience. But as ESG becomes a core part of strategy, risk management, and performance, it also brings real complexity, so fragmented data, overlapping frameworks, cross-functional ownership, and constantly evolving requirements. In the next 20 minutes, I'll show you how Protecht DRM simplifies ESG program management, giving you the tools to centralize ESG data, manage risks and opportunities more effectively, and really drive sustainability outcomes. You'll also see how we bring consistency and ease to ESG reporting by linking everything back to a regulatory framework like ESRS and GRI, with cross-mapping to reduce duplication and keep your reporting streamlined and audit ready. Okay, so let's begin our ESG journey in Protecht DRM by looking at the frameworks library, which is really the foundation of any structured ESG program. So the frameworks library itself is embedded within the central libraries, and the central libraries allow for data to be referenced across the entire system, and this ultimately ensures that risk and a taxonomy is embedded consistently throughout the system. So we have two frameworks here that are provided out of the box, and these are the examples we've got. So ESRS and GRI standards. So what we can really do here within the frameworks library itself is capture frameworks, standards, or regulations in a nested hierarchy. So we will follow the ESRS, European Sustainability Reporting Standards, as the master framework. And then to represent the cross-mapping, we've then got the GRI standards, which are then linked directly into ESRS. You can create your own frameworks. You don't have to use our out of the box, but as I say, we do have a collection of frameworks out of the box ready to go. Before we dive into the actual hierarchy or the framework itself, we can then understand the framework in a little bit more detail. So if we click on the definition, really here we have accountability of the framework itself. We can provide some or attach some helpful documentation for the end user. The responsible person will be notified when the review is required for this particular framework. And then under the additional items, this is where we're able to extend the framework across the entire system and link in the various components of the system to that framework. In this case, we have obligations, a linkage to the wider enterprise risk management framework, even maybe policy management from a compliance and governance perspective, but then the materiality assessment and disclosures that we'll focus on for ESG. To extend this out even further, it's very simple. You just click add, and then you're presented with a list of data capture forms or registers as we call them, which you can then very quickly link into this particular framework. So it's very easy to then connect the framework across the system. Now we've built up that picture of the framework, we can then dive into the hierarchy itself and the requirements. So really we have this tree structure, and we're going to dive into the environmental impact, and then we can even search on a particular requirement, which I'll do E11. The framework is filtered, and now we have this particular requirement that we can drill into. What's also neat is being able to see how many different components of the linkages are linked to this particular requirement. And we're able to see, for example, we've got 7 other frameworks that are linked to this disclosure for climate change mitigation. If we double click and click into the framework requirement, we're then presented with a details page of the requirement, and then we've got the linkages split across the top in tabs. We're going to say that this is applicable to the organization. There could be different workflow or triggers if the requirement was mandatory, but in this case we'll just select applicable. We have further details on the requirement, some practical guidance, and then scrolling down all the way to the bottom, we're able to carry out a gap analysis. And then if we're not compliant with this requirement, we're able to then capture via a mandatory field an explanation for that omission. As we then go through to the linked frameworks, we see we've got a comprehensive list of the mapped GRI standards to the overall ESRS framework. And then what we're able to do when we add a new framework is really drill down and search for, let's say, for example, 305-3. And then I can come in and then just add that extra requirement via cross-mapping to the master requirement of ESRS. We've got a list of obligations that are then linked to this particular requirement. Now, this could be linked to a third-party provider, or you can capture the obligations manually within the system. We'll focus then next on the materiality assessment. And really what we have here is a centralized approach for carrying out assessments on a particular material topic. So we can see 2 topics here that allows us to then prioritize based on the overall material topic rating, and we'll focus on this one here as critical for climate change mitigation. So if we just click into this particular materiality assessment, we're presented with the material topics, a description to provide more context. We can link this back to an ESG pillar. We've got accountability through the owner, who is John, the head of the department. We've talked previously about linkages across the system, so we do have placeholders for linkages to processes, vendor risk management module, but this module can also, or the ESG module, can also be standalone. Any other linkages will be captured here. We then have a space to be able to really capture the different stakeholders that would be impacted by this particular material topic. So we provide that dedicated space to be able to outline which employees, business units are impacted, the external stakeholders, and then provide a rationale as to why those external stakeholders were captured. Okay, so we've captured the material topic details. We'll then move on to the assessment itself. So we have the ability to then capture the impacts via environment, economy, or people, depending on the ratings or the impacts, sorry, that we select. We then have the appropriate impact captured. So whether it's positive or negative for economy or negative impact for environment. This just means that then for the end user, depending on the lens that they're looking to assess the impact, the appropriate fields are then displayed. You'll notice as we go through, we do try and limit the amount of text that is available and then really structure the responses via tick boxes, drop downs, just to provide that consistency of responses. Ultimately, this will then drive consistent reporting. As we then go through, we can either carry out a risks assessment or an opportunities assessment or both. So as we then go through, depending on the options that we've chosen via the tick boxes above, we then have the appropriate ratings through the different lenses for assessment of risks or opportunities that have been displayed to us. Ultimately, this then arrives at an overall assessment. Very simply here, it is a drop down, but this could be automatically calculated through a formula of your choosing. As we then move to the review and approval, really what we're looking to do here is via the workflow engine is trigger automated emails to the approvers and reviewers throughout the process to ensure there's consistency in reviews. And the person who's responsible for the review and the person who's responsible for this particular material topic, this is kept on their radar so it never drops off. As we then go through to the ESG material assessment, we can then decide whether this is a material topic for reporting or not, which can then support then the flow down into the disclosures. Finally, during the management stage of the cycle, really we'll dive into the action plans in a second, but just to cover off the different linkages that we can get, this is another place where we've got the linkage back to the framework. If we were looking at this materiality assessment in isolation, we'd always be able to get back to the framework that we have already linked. So now we've understood the details behind the material topic, we've carried out the assessment, and then we've got review and approval. Really, when it comes to carrying out a action plan, each material topic can be linked to one or more action plans with clear goals, timelines, and owners set for each action plan. We'll just dive into one called Reduced Carbon Emissions for Corporate Travel, which is this one here. And then as we dive into the action plan, really we're driving the accountability to be able to move from intention to impact through these detailed action plans. So we're able to capture defined target values and the type of metrics that we have in place. Now, why do we need action plans like this with these values and targets? Well, really, because this is how the different frameworks that we've seen in ESRS require organizations to disclose not only the ESG risks, but also how they're being managed and measured over time. So being able to have a plan that's set out like this, you're able to then track and demonstrate evidence of that progress, whether you're on track, off track, what the ratings were over time. And this is really good for whether it's regulators, investors, or internal stakeholders. As we then move through to the management stage of this particular action plan, this is really where we're able to drill down into more detailed actions that we can then distribute across the wider system. So this is the general actions repository, and I don't want to get the two confused. So the action plan is more detail around the ESG plan that we want to put in place over a longer period, and then we have more tactical actions that we're able to put in place for the in being able to then capture these over time. So we've also got linkages to metrics to monitor the performance of these targets and the overall action plan. We can link back to our wider enterprise risk management framework as well through the linked risks. And then we've got the ability to then capture the emission disclosures, whether it GHG emissions or any other related financed emissions. And then we've got the further linkages back to this material topic. So we'll just cancel out of the action plan. Now, very finally, we're able to embed contextual guidance as well, which we've got just some example here related to ESG. Now, having completed the materiality assessments, we'll just cancel out of this and come back, and finally we'll finish off before we get onto the exciting part of reports through looking at the ESG disclosures. So really what we want to do is capture a single repository or a single location to manage the preparation of reporting disclosure requirements, which we've got here, and then we're linking these back to the frameworks, and through that cross mapping, being able to then link the different disclosures to help monitor and report on compliance. We'll click into a particular disclosure. So the annual report for 2024. Again, we've got that linkage back to the framework. When we're looking at this in isolation, we can always come back to the framework. Again, that is the foundation of really the ESG program. We just capture some very simple details relating to the disclosure, the reporting periods itself, supporting documentation, who the audience is, the method, and then if there's any actions, we can link actions here. And then very simply, there are different places to go through and capture the review and the time it was reviewed, who it was reviewed by, and again for the approval. So a very simple disclosures register, but really, again, just to reiterate, one single place to capture all disclosures and then linking them back to the frameworks and benefiting from that cross mapping for compliance. Now we have completed the view of looking at the frameworks, drilling down and looking at the cross mapping of frameworks, all the way through to looking how the data can link from across the system, and then going into the ESG specific registers or processes. So the materiality assessments, the action plans, the emissions registers, and then also the ESG disclosures very briefly. So to close out the demonstration, really, we'll focus on the reporting itself. So we'll start off with the ESG management dashboard, and this really provides an overview of your overall ESG objectives and metrics. We can monitor how we're tracking and meeting our sustainability plans and the related risks. So we have the material topics by impact rating, by ESG pillar, by material issue, and then the action plan status itself. So really through this report, we're able to understand how we are tracking against our ESG goals. So here on the right hand side, we've got the metrics linked back to the risk and the action plans in place, so we can see that over time. And then underneath we have the ESG pillars linked back to the risk and again the action plans.
With all of these dashboards, what we can do is right click and annotate the dashboard, provide a comment, which we'll just do now for test ESG. And then we're able to annotate this dashboard, filter down the right-hand side. So we can filter on a particular pillar, for example, environment, and then the dashboard will filter real time without the commentary already applied. We can very simply then save this as a bookmark. So we'll save this as ESG test. And now we've got that bookmark that we can then refer back to at any time. All the dashboards can be exported out into multiple formats, Excel, PowerPoint, PDF, and the PowerPoint really being critical as we're able to snippet out some of these dashboards and charts and put them into any of our ESG reporting packs. So now let's take a very quick look at the GHG emissions dashboard. Now this is very similar to the finance emissions dashboard as well. And really what we're looking to do is track our carbon footprint. In this case, we're broken down by scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3 across the year-on-year change versus the change from the baseline. And really we're able to, when we understand the trend, put more appropriate and targeted action plans in place. If we then quickly finish off by looking at the financed emissions dashboard, again, what we're looking to do here is really provide an overview of the financed emissions against your targets. This will help portfolio managers adjust lending strategies to reduce exposure to sectors with high emissions, as an example. And then the dashboard will then be able to provide a comparison of financed emissions against baseline data with a year-over-year trend. And then we've got the tracking of lending amounts and scope emissions generated by each sectors here. So commercial properties, electricity, gas, housing, manufacturing, for example.
That concludes the demonstration of ESG within Protecht. Now, there will be more coming out over time as we expand on what we've currently gone through. A couple more things I wanted to cover off is when we send out the pack after the webinar, there will be a comprehensive set of documents and videos that you can click into as these links to various ebooks demonstrate. And then very finally, thank you very much for your attention throughout the webinar, and hopefully we will see you again soon.